everyone, welcome back to another process video. This time I tried to record most of the process. There are definitely some lapses where I didn't hit record, forgot to hit record, whatever the case was. But I did my best, and we do have a semi-lengthy video that does detail quite a bit of the process, and you will see in this one that I struggled a lot. But what else is new? If you guys have watched my streams, you know that a lot of my quote unquote process is going back and forth and just like figuring things out and trial and error, and that's okay. For a long time, I didn't think it was okay. I thought it made me amateur or, meant that I was doing something wrong, but I'm learning, we're all learning, and that's the fun part about art, and also the pain part about art. But here we are. This piece was some fan art. As you can see, we've got some good old liquify. Love me some liquify. Some fan art of a book that I read during the month that I really loved and wanted to create some art of the characters. So that was my inspiration for this piece, as often is my inspiration for pieces, because I enjoy doing fan art and book art, and that's sort of the type of art or the type of work that I want to gear my portfolio towards. So here we have just like doing a little bit of black and white rendering on the faces, trying to think about the planes, all that good stuff. You will notice that a lot of this changes. This is a piece that I didn't know if I really intended to make a full piece. I think originally I was just sort of sketching, and then it got away from me, and then I didn't have necessarily a solid foundation in terms of my sketch. And as I went along with it, I ended up working on this piece in my mentorship with Silasay, who offers mentorships through her Patreon. If anyone ever wants to check it out, because it's truly done wonders for my art. Anyway, as I worked with Sil on this piece in our mentorship sessions, I did a lot of editing and reevaluating composition shifts. So this is a piece that really, I think, more than most other pieces that I've done, has such a different outcome at the end than we started with in the beginning. And so that's kind of an interesting thing as well. And something that I've had to battle as an artist is allowing myself to make those bigger changes, which I do in this piece. I completely repaint her face. A lot of their bodies gets reworked. There's a lot going on. The composition completely shifts. And I think that that's a really big learning curve for a lot of people, myself included. It's just allowing ourselves to make those changes and not having to stick to our guns or like what we start with in the beginning, because this is digital. Like, we do have the ability to change things in a way that, like, as someone who also does a lot of traditional art and, very permanent ink and marker traditional work, you don't have the ability to make these big changes. You sort of have to improvise and work with them. And I think that there's something really nice about digital art being able to make those big changes. And so getting comfortable with that and allowing ourselves to experiment and explore, because if it doesn't work, we can always go back. We can always try again, or, have many different iterations, which I do. I often will group things in my layers at various stages, so that if I do decide that I want to go back a couple phases, or if something's not working, I have different levels of finished product that I can go back to. So here's where the composition shift happened. One of the things that we noticed, Sil and I, during my mentorship, was it was very top heavy in a way that it didn't have to be. And so by extending the characters upwards and then sort of adding that moon, because we were losing a lot of just brightness or interest in the piece, kind of, it was just all very flat to one value, and so we added that moon, or thought about adding that moon, and just, it shifted the whole composition. We brought the characters up, and so it was a really cool change. And I don't know if I've ever really, shifted a composition quite that much, at this stage in a piece. And so it was a fun experiment in letting go of control, but also kind of regaining control of a piece. And I ended up, I love it. I love the change that it brought, the shift in the piece. It was just really fun. And then, as you can see, we're just sort of continuing to paint things out. I do end up repainting her face. The face right now is truly causing me pain to look at, but it is a process, and a lot of experimenting again. That's just the way that I work. I just, I gotta try things. I gotta see different things on. And sometimes it's just a matter of, I tried, do I want her eyes more open and looking at him? Like, something wasn't working, and it was just a matter of trying things out and seeing what does ultimately fit the piece. Strangely enough, I had the most success with his face, which truly goes against everything I ever thought about myself. But something about his face and angle really clicked with me. I do feel like I shifted his face a little bit too much in the end with lighting, and I don't know why. I'm jumping ahead of myself, but something about the end product and his face, I lost a little bit of what I like looking at now. But that's okay. Like, things are going to shift, things are going to change. And one of the things that I'm constantly trying to get better at is maintaining my early on energy as I finish a piece. I find that I lose certain aspects as I work, and I don't think that this is just a me problem. I think a lot of artists experience this, whether it's, feeling like you lose the motion and energy of a sketch and it feels stiff in the end. I over render things, I overthink things, I overlook at things, and that is something that I just have to get better at. And it will only come with practice, is, learning when to leave things alone, when to step away, when to take a break. And as my eye gets better, I think that will continue to improve in my pieces. I had a lot of fun doing the hair. One of the things that I've been trying to get better at is, especially with darker hair, making sure that there is enough detail and, that I'm getting enough shape and form, even though it's darker. Just kind of playing with it still in the same way that I would if it was like a lighter toned hair. And so I think I did achieve some cool things with, especially his hair. I'm quite proud of how it came out. And I had a lot of fun doing it, finding those shapes and, getting more confident. One of the things that I have been enjoying about my process as I paint is sort of thinking about the way that shapes and shadows and highlights are sculpted into a piece. I don't know what it is. I just feel like I still have a ways to go, but I'm beginning to see form a little bit better, and understand it. And it's changing the way that I go about painting. And I have a lot of fun, like, sculpting out those moments and, finding the shifts in values and shadows and everything. It's been fun. I've been having a lot of fun and a lot of stress. Like, don't get me wrong. It's also pain and suffering. But we are artists, so it does tend to happen. It is a part of the game. Adding a little bit of rim light there, obviously, and I do paint a lot of fantasy. There is an element of, I don't think that there would necessarily be as much rim lighting in the piece, but it's fantasy. Like, yeah, the moon is absolutely huge, but I think that that's okay, because I want my pieces to have, I don't know, just a feeling to them, and sometimes that's going to be an escape from absolute realism, and that's absolutely okay as well. Is finding those little elements that you can push, you know, as long as it fits the composition and looks right to the eye. It doesn't have to be like fully 100% realistic. And I think that that's like the fun of art in general. Even if you aren't painting like fantasy fan art, I think that allowing yourself to have fun with certain elements like that is really, really wonderful. So here we are, just sort of adjusting some background stuff, continuing to change that stuff up, just vibing, trying out different shapes, different, structures as it goes. Keeping an eye on tangents. We did, again, I worked on this a couple sessions with Still. We did find, a stray tangent line, which was very, very, the audacity of me, truly. So you do notice that we will straighten that column behind her because it creates like a weird, just the curvature of that and then the curvature of her head. Again, this was a lot of shifting and a lot of trying new things and just adjustments, which I think, as much as it made it really difficult, it was a really good experience for me. So we just kind of continue on doing some cleaning up, adding some clarity in places, especially with their clothing. Just a lot of the finding, the specificity of the piece, I guess, adding not even detail so much as just, really focusing and thinking about the final piece. Their clothes, I knew I needed to give a lot of attention to. Their hands get more attention, so it's just sort of going through and cleaning up, trying to decide what I wanted to do with his garment. Yeah, so just, a lot of going over things, smoothing things out, adding textures, thinking about fabric and folds and structures and things like that as we go and we paint. I feel like this is the very boring part because it's just all a bunch of the same, but I hope that you enjoy watching this all the same. We will shortly get into some attempts at color starting now, and you can actually see what colors I'm picking. And again, I definitely went back and forth with colors on this. I learned during this piece that I don't know if black and white to color is serving me anymore. For a while it was. For a while I didn't feel totally confident with implementing enough hue variation and value shifts within my coloring. And so working black and white to color was a very useful technique. Now, I'm not so sure that it really does lend a whole lot to my process. If anything, I think it's starting to slow me down. So going forward, I did begin to work more just yeeting myself straight into color, which has been fun and an experiment. But I think that this piece, I struggled more than I have in a while with finding the right colors. And it could just be a whole situation of my values not being, fully correct, or just, not being able to, I don't know, make it work. I I do enjoy the end product, and I like the vibrancy of the colors that we did end up getting. But it definitely took a minute to get there. There was an earlier iteration of color, so it was just a lot of trial and error. Again, which is okay. Like, that's totally part of the process, and being okay with that is very important. But going forward, I did decide to start working just in color. So now we're just brushing in some saturation, some different colors. Again, using a lot of different layer modes. I use screen, multiply, overlay. Overlay is a really good one if you really want to like brighten up some brights, but without making it like too much of a higher value. I don't know, the mechanics of the different layer modes. Like, I truly just experiment and see what works for what I want in that piece. Maybe one day I'll actually learn the, technicalities behind them, but today is not that day. Just going in and brushing in a lot of saturation, really trying to make them pop and come forward. Especially with the background being so much darker, and even with like his clothing, being a darker value, a darker color. I want to find moments where I can add pops and saturation and like lean into that, pops of just color and playing with that and brushing in, different hues in places that maybe I wouldn't have thought of. And I think that's always been one of my favorite things about working with black and white color, is that it taught me to be a little bit more bold with my color choices. And now that I've begun working straight to color, I do feel like I am able to bring a lot of that in, because I've spent so long working this way and just attempting to be bolder with my color choices. And as always, we're cleaning things up. We are, brushing over, painting over certain moments, adding more details, especially, in her clothing. I knew that I wanted that sleeve to be transparent with that sheer blue fabric. And then I knew that I wanted to sort of add some shimmer and shine, sort of implement some metallic threads. So I did do that later, but we had to go in and just clean things up. It's a lot of, once I do add the color on top of the black and white and merge that down, we have to go back and clean things up, push things, that might have gotten lost in translation. And so, yeah, it's truly just a lot of experimenting. As always, like, there is no one right way. My process has always been just a lot of going back and forth and trying different things out, trying different, doing a layer on top with a clipping mask and just like brushing in some new colors and seeing if it works. If it doesn't, then you just delete the layer. Like, no harm, no foul. But allowing myself to play that way has been a really important part of me becoming an artist, and like we're coming into my own as an artist, I guess. Like, everyone is an artist. If you do art, you are an artist. So just going through again, cleaning things up, brushing in more details, especially on those fabrics, making sure that I am getting, different textures in the fabrics, the folds, stuff like that. We're going to go in and make sure that the curtains have a lot of texture, and, that nothing looks terribly flat in the piece. Again, because I can't leave the faces alone. We're playing with faces more and more. I think this is where I began to kind of overthink his face. Certain things weren't working. And so just going in and trying to add a little bit more specificity and, think about the planes of his face a bit more, brushing up her face. I'm quite proud of the hue variation in her skin tone, and like those purples, and then the pinks on the outside, like definitely just playing a lot with that. I had also at some point, and I think that this was in a part that I forgot to record, a lot of the times I'll use like color lookup layers or photo filter layers to try to just shift some colors. So I did tone down some of the saturation in the piece, just a bit to sort of, get a little bit more of a fluid tone working. So you'll notice that there was a bit earlier on a shift in like the blue of her outfit, just because it was seeming a little bit too saturated, and especially against the saturation of the sky behind them, I wanted to tone that down just a little bit. And here we are again playing with faces, because it never ends. Again, it's the overthinking, the constantly just, seeing and re-seeing, redoing things, flipping and unflipping, adjusting his arm because that was giving me some trouble. This is definitely a moment where I entered crisis mode again on the piece, and I did have to take several steps back and, just really, just a lot of, when there's an idea in your head, or like that something doesn't look quite how it should, but you can't put your finger on it. That's definitely where having an art community and a mentor has come in, is having someone that when those moments are happening, I can really, get another perspective. We had painted over his facial hair, or maybe I decided that I didn't like how it was looking. So, going back in and adding that, the shape of that, the texture of his slight stubbly beard. And I adjusted his skin tone because he wasn't quite the right skin tone for what I wanted for the character. So going in and, using a layer mode above, I think I used soft light there. And yeah, just going in and painting things over, trying to bring some details, some attention to details, into new places, and just making sure that nothing gets left behind. Everything that I wanted to achieve, I had to go back and, just make sure that I was doing it. And of course, that's always the balance of, making sure that it's not too much detail across the entire piece, and certain things need to have more detail, less detail, going in with that basic concept. This is, we had to do some work on her hair. I was struggling with her hairline, with her braid crown. Again, this was just like the big struggle chunk of the piece. It was very hard to like keep the recording going, because I knew that I was having some struggles. And that was like a weird kind of vulnerable thing to be like, okay, now I'm going to have to talk about this. But I think it's important to know that like pieces go through these phases, and that's okay. When I'm working on something, 9 times out of 10, I am truly just going back and forth between being excited, being afraid, liking where it's headed, questioning where it's headed, toggling things on and off, and just, it's a lot of back and forth. It's quite a journey, especially on these sort of bigger pieces that have a bit more going on in them to think about. So we're just sort of cleaning things up still. Again, I knew that I needed to give a little bit more attention to her hair, especially compared to how his hair was looking. And I felt like she was lacking in the same amount of attention. So just trying to shape out, the flow of the hair, where it kind of tucks in, the fall of the braid, wrapping around her head, and then of course adding little wispies just to sort of give it a little bit more interest. Kind of now just thinking about the overall piece, and then the last little details, I almost forgot to do anything to her hand, because it's such a small little moment that I just didn't think about it, because I had done his hand and then decided that she didn't need fingers. Yeah, so it's just, I bounce around a lot on pieces, and that's just what works for me best, is not really finishing one area at any given time. I feel like I'm constantly like roaming my eyes around a piece to see what else needs to happen, what else can happen, rather than, completing one section and then not looking at it again. And then it's time to sort of think about the background a bit. I was feeling, overall happy with how they were looking. I wanted to add some texture to the moon. Got to add some stars back there. But with the moon, I think it's so easy to fall into the trap of like, oh, it's just a giant sphere in the sky that is shiny. And I definitely did fall into that trap. And once I was able to again talk to Sil, guys, I really love my mentorship. It has changed the way I approach art. It has changed the way I look at art. It changed the way I finish pieces. Anyway, she, reminded me to think about the details that there could be. Like, it doesn't need to be extreme, like every single crater in the moon, but just to add a little bit more interest in there. And so now we're kind of going into like the finishing touches area, adding some cool rim light and then brushing in some warmer rim light on her side, since we do have, the sort of interior of the balcony that they're standing, so it can brush in some brights for her, which is sort of a nice contrast that I liked. Cleaning up their edges, making sure that there's, there wouldn't be a ton of light there, but definitely, a little bit of separation between them. Wanted to punch up the red on his outfit because he was just looking a little bland and boring. And I don't think that I caught it in my recording because it was such a last minute change. Like, I had prepared my post for Instagram and then the next morning looked at the piece and was like, what was I thinking? And that's when I changed his sleeve to like a gray instead of that stark white that I still don't know what I was thinking. I clearly lost my mind. So yeah, I don't think that I caught that in my recording, but I do end up changing that. Again, just brushing some, I think I overworked. I'm not mad about the faces, but I think that I overworked them both in their own ways. I just could not leave them alone. I don't know if it's because this was like a longer span of a piece, like it just took me longer, but yeah, I could not leave those faces alone for the life of me. Now we're just continuing to add detail in the clothing. Again, just making sure edges are finished and things are getting the right amount of attention. Using a little bit of a textured brush to add some texture into their clothing as well. I've really enjoyed doing that lately with my pieces. So I felt pretty confident with where they were headed. So we're going to go into the background here shortly, in a bit. Just kidding. We're gonna keep doing her sleeve first, adding those metallic threads, which was just on another layer, and masking that so I can brush in some brighter little bits that make it look a little bit shiny. Very, very subtle, but I think that it added just like an extra little level to the piece, to her outfit. And I really love how her sleeve came out. I had a lot of fun doing that. I love doing a shiny material, or a sheer material, also a shiny material. I'm tired. This is very hard, you guys, doing these voiceovers. I'm sure there's a better way, but I don't know it. Again, brushing in some of that rim lighting to finish that through line, and it just makes her pop a little. Okay, and now, in a moment, so soon, we're going to hit that background, and I got some inspiration from the book covers to decide what I wanted to do for that motif. So just sort of sketched out a little, like not overthinking it, because we're gonna, brush over it. We're gonna make it, not stand out too much, brush some texture over it. And what you're going to see me do, and this is something that I love doing for embroidery, for like these sorts of details, where you want to add like a little bit of a 3D look to it. If you go into filter on Photoshop, at the top menu, filter, go down to stylize and select emboss, you're gonna get this new menu, and it's gonna change your life. Okay, I really love playing with it. You just experiment, you guys. That's ever since I started experimenting, I feel like I am, getting new results, and it's just a lot of fun. But I love that emboss. It's such a like quick little moment on the video, but if you guys ever have a minute to like play with that, I definitely recommend it. Again, I do it for like embroidery. I think I did it for one of the steps on Juliet's dress in my last piece from last month. But yeah, it just sort of, it uses, I don't know, it adds like a 3D element to it, I guess. And now we're doing like the finishing touches, which is exciting. Adding a little bit of a glow to them because I can't resist. Merging things down, just trying to clean up my layers and just see what's going on. And again, just like cleaning stuff up. It's just sort of the final process. It's just a lot of little tweaks. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you have any questions like specific to my process, which as I always say is constantly changing, always feel free to ask, especially on like the Patreon. I want to create content that you guys enjoy, or if you're seeing this, later down the line when it is released to the public, like, never hesitate to reach out. I will do my best to answer any questions. But I had a lot of fun and a lot of struggle with this piece. I learned a lot. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Thank you for watching. Bye.